The story of Kaido, as told by Darius the Green Angel. So Kaido was a boy who, was of Oni blood. See, Onis are these things that have horns and are very durable, and they're strong, like strong and durable people. His people were taken, enslaved, killed, and other things. But he was a boy who was trying to, keep people off of his dick. So he would run around with a club and start clubbing people to death. And they were like, this young man, we need to take him and put him in our military, or we need to take him and make him a slave, or we'll just fucking get rid of him. Well, we'll put him in impaled down. He ended up escaping, the Marines so many times. They kept finding his dick. So, he ended up having a bounty of 70 million by himself as, a 15-year-old boy. Running around with the club, just clubbing people to death, They tried to execute his ass too, and he couldn't be executed. He couldn't be hung. He couldn't be hung. He couldn't be his head chopped up by Jesus. They did think about drowning him in water, and at that time they couldn't because he didn't have his devil fruit yet. See, this boy was running around with no devil fruit and just clubbing niggas down. Clubbing people the fuck up. Boom, boom. anytime he needed to eat, he was just like, you know what, I'll stop clubbing you niggas, you can take me in. And they took him in, and then he just leave. He's like, he's only in here for, to eat. Then he's gonna leave. So we shouldn't even man, try to fuck with that shit. He was feared and shit at a young age. Eventually he met a guy named Whitebeard, and he was like, boy, you're gonna get your dick hunted a lot. You need to come with us. You'll at least have some, time to decompress and not have to worry about shit so much. And Kaido was like, damn, he's probably right. I'll just chill the fuck out for a minute with these niggas called the Rocks Pirates. And in the Rocks Pirates, he was like the boy, but he was still one of their strongest members. The Big Mom and Shiki and Whitebeard, Captain John. Were part of the Rocks crew. And they went all over, and people feared them. This guy, Rocks, was a powerful pirate, apparently. Nobody knows of his power, but he had the likes of Whitebeard and Big Mom and all these other conquer users, Kaido. They get to God Valley, and they start running shit with the, Gold Roger pirates. And the Celestial Dragons had their slave hunting game, going on. At the same time, the God Valley incident was erased from history. But the people who were there back then remember it. Kaido, ended up getting his devil fruit because Big Mom went in and took the devil fruit from Ivankov, Emporio Ivankov, who later became a revolutionary. She took it from him, and then Kaido was like, cool, now I have a devil fruit. I'll get the fuck out of here. Hey, I ain't getting caught by the Marines. They done caught Rocks already. Nigga, I ain't getting caught. I said, what? Man, I'm getting the fuck out of here, bitch. That's what he said. And he got the fuck out of there. He said, bitch, I'm out of here. He got the devil fruit, and he was like, okay, now I can start making moves for myself. I was with those niggas for a long time, and it was cool and everything, but now I can finally do what I want to do. And start my own, empire and shit. And he had this, bitch with him who ate, another devil fruit called the Clone fruit. And he also took a devil fruit called the Orochi devil fruit. God damn it, that fucking snake thing. I don't remember what devil fruit is. It's a mythical zone type though. And this devil fruit was given to a boy named, or a young man named Kurozumi Orochi. And upon, or Odin's, he left to go find, the One Piece with Gold Roger and everything else. But during that time, Shogun Tokuyaki, right? That is Odin's father, right? So he was overthrown by Koizumi Orochi, and then he became Shogun, and Kaido was like the emperor by default because nobody could stand against Kaido. So Odin comes back from his journey, and then Kaido's there, and he also was like, yo, you won't be taking Kurozumi's spot. He's the Shogun. You're just gonna have to live with being a daimyo. And he didn't cause to whatever the fuck he says. And he's like, as long as my family's alright, that's all that matters. But slowly, Kaido started to implement his rules. All the good food would go to the flower capital, and everybody else would work as slaves in an Udon prison. Anybody who's against Koizumi Orochi's regime and wants Odin instead will be enslaved. They will go malnourished. They will eat small devil fruits. I'll create an army full of people who have artificial devil fruits, and we'll run shit everywhere. I'll take over the world eventually. Disobedience is not tolerated. You'll be met with, imprisonment, death. I'll take your water away. I'll take your, family members and throw them in Udon prison. You will eat these devil fruits I have placed out. You'll become my gifted, the people who he calls right. And that is fucked up what he did. But even before that, though, he was running around with these fucked up group, right? And he actually saved King from a experiment. His name was Albert. And he was like, what's your name? Albert. They're trying to do tests on me and see what the fuck's going on with my Lemurian heritage. They want my lineage factor, man. They're trying to kill me. They fucking killed everybody I know. They keep doing these fucking tests on my dick. And he's like, oh yeah, I'll fucking kill these niggas then. You can run with me and be my friend. We'll fucking, turn this world on its fucking head. I'm gonna be king of the pirates, so there's nobody else who can be king. And that's what he told him, and King was like, all right, I'll be your right-hand man then. I'll follow you to the end of the world, And that's what they did. They eventually got Queen, and then, he had a skirmish with a man named Gecko Moria. We don't like Moria over here. That is... No, that is... how it is, because Moria was youthful, and back then Moria wasn't as out of shape. But even so, Kaido was not no punk either. Now, Kaido wasn't, what he was when he was in Wano, but he was still, a beast. He was known as Kaido, King of the Beasts. The world's strongest creature, and it was because of his devil fruit. He then, like I said, he took over Wano and, had, Orochi, dictate rules to the people and everything else. The flower capital was taken care of. As long as they heeded cause to the shogun and everything else, everybody else would be enslaved, eat devil fruits, and get killed if they fucking go against Kaido's rule. And basically, Wano became a pirate haven for the Kaido pirates. It was Kaido's territory and everything else. He was operated there and everything. Niggas would not come there and other stuff. The world government already wasn't going there. So Kaido knew that he could fuck around there and do stuff. That was another reason why he took over there, because he knew the government wouldn't be fucking around over there. They wouldn't be sending admirals and extra stuff. They wouldn't try shit like that. Certain lore that they heard about a nigga named Ryu and stuff. That's why. That's why they, to think about running over there. But he he started, fighting against Odin because Odin was tired of the shit. He heard everything that was going on. He saw shit, and he was like, "These people are my people. They actually do love me, and I love them too. I ain't gonna let them fucking, go through this. I won't let my family go through this or anything. I'll take down Kaido if I have to." And he fought against Kaido. He ended up scarring Kaido. And Kaido always remembered it too because there was only a few people who could actually do damage to him. In a silhouette, it showed red-haired Shanks. It showed Roxy's Beck. It showed Roger. It showed Whitebeard. And it showed Odin. And then another person eventually. But we ain't there yet. That guy, and that happened. Kaido got scarred by Odin, but unfortunately Odin lost. Trickery, he was deceived by the bitch who has the clone fruit, or had it before Mr. 2, and then he was defeated. He got knocked out. Then he was boiled in oil, but he was like, it's a fitting end for me because my name was Odin, and Odin meant to boil in oil. But he told his, retainers to, open the land of Wano, and one day, it would be, free from Kaido's rule. Kaido was like, this is a foolish man, you will die. And he died. Kaido then ruled over Wano with the Iron Fist for a good 2 decades, and that brought a lot of pain and suffering to the people of Wano. People lost family members. All the daimyos who were on Odin's side were killed because they wouldn't submit to Kaido's rule. And Kaido was just too powerful, to stop. Kaido's own daughter took on a different identity because of the way he wasn't the best parent. Like, he was right about certain things, like, she is not a guy, but he didn't have to put chains on a bitch and do it that way he did. That way wasn't right. He didn't need to do that to her. His way his ways of, disciplining his child wasn't right. Not right at all. So he went on and no, and he didn't do that. He found animals who wanted to run shit. He's like, let's take over the world together. He was gonna make an appearance in Marineford. He was gonna go fight too. The Marines got a call that Kaido was on his way. However, he was stopped by a man named Shanks. Red-haired Shanks stopped Kaido from going to, Marineford. I don't know what was said, but probably a Conqueror's hockey clash, and niggas drank, and they went their separate ways because Kaido loves to drink, as he is a pirate like that. He loves him some sake and shit, so they probably, said drinks and went their separate ways. And he went back to Wano. But then 2 years later, he's trying to kill himself again because he's like, damn, I just, don't like myself. I want to die like, a warrior, kind of like people of Elbaf, an honorable death. I killed Odin, that was an honorable death for him. He didn't deserve to go out that way. I, kind of feel bad for how that shit went a little bit. And then also, I'm Kaido. I deserve to be defeated by somebody who's powerful. But that person hasn't shown up. I'm too strong. I'm known as the strongest creature, so I'll fall from, Sky Island and land on, Kid and his alliance that he had with Basil Hawkins and Apu. And he basically did exactly that. He landed on that alliance and he basically made it crumble. When a Kaido appeared, they knew that they couldn't team up against him. Even with the power they had, they couldn't do it. Kid still tried to stand on business, but he couldn't. It's Kaido. So he was taken to Udon prison and he was chained up. And he was doing work there. But the other two ended up, siding with Kaido because they were afraid to, go against it. And they became headliners and shit. So after that, eventually Luffy showed up in Wano. Well, his crew showed up. It was Zoro and Nico Robin and Brooke, Frankie, and that's who. Oh wait, not Brooke. My bad. It was Frankie. They ended up showing up later. Luffy reunited with his crew. But he caught wind that they were, making an alliance against him. So Kaido was kind of pissed about that. And he was like, these brats are trying to overthrow me. Oh, fuck. God damn it. I don't think I'll have time. Not for this story. It's other things I'm doing. But Kaido ended up going to the scene where he heard Luffy was at. He destroyed part of Kuri where his crew was at, and then Luffy went up to fight him. Luffy wasn't prepared for what Kaido had in store. He got his head smashed into the ground with one of Luffy's fists, but then after that, Kaido showed his, base form, and he was like, I'm not even sweating right now. I'm a little bit drunk, but you actually sobered me up. So now I'm pissed. So he knocked Luffy out of Gear 4, and then he went into Udon Prison 2, where he met Kid and everything else. Then they, Big Mom and Kaido hadn't seen each other for a minute, and Big Mom went there to find Luffy. But Kaido was like, I'm handling that business myself. An old bitch like you can't do shit no more. I see how you are and everything else. They fought for a couple days before the raid on Onigashima. And they were like, you know what? We used to be friends back in the day. Let's stop and drink and think this through. We can take on the Worst Generation members and take them down. And that's what they tried to do. Kaido was called out by the niggas who, fought against him back in the day, the Akazaya 8. Now there's a reason why I say 8, because Kanjuro ended up betraying them, but they knew that. They still went in there after him for what he did to Odin. Killed him. Then he enslaved the people of Wano, caused them to suffer. They weren't going to stand for that. They all ran up on him. He went into his dragon form and went to the rooftop, where Jack got taken down by Sulong form, Dogstorm, and Cat Viper. And then the rest of the Akazai 9, Denjiro, Kawamatsu, Raizo, Izo, and god damn, what's the good? Okiku and Kinemon, Foxfire Kinemon, and Ashura Doji were there, and they fought the best they could. But unfortunately, they stood no chance. They stood no chance. Kano wasn't gonna, stand for that shit, They reopened his wound and they were like, you remind me of that day and other things, but your efforts are futile. I'm still more powerful than you guys. And he ended up defeating them. And they were all fucked up. Then, no, they were. They were on the ground all fucking bloody and shit. Then, they like to fucking screw it. Then Luffy and Kid and Law and Killer and goddamn Law, Zoro came too. Those 5 went up there to fight Big Mom and Kaido. And they were fighting against Kaido. They got their hits in, each one of them. Eventually, they used a combined attack, Kaido and Big Mom. Zoro blocked that attack. Then Zoro went on and he used Conqueror Coding and 9-sword style Demon Aura Ashura to try to land an attack on Kaido, and he did end up, bypassing his durability, scarring him and shit. Now, that silhouette I brought up earlier, Luffy was like a question mark for like a person who could defeat Kaido in like one-on-one combat. Now, Luffy had to fight against Kaido. He told, Law to take Zoro down there and get him healed. And Luffy was fighting against Kaido. And he got knocked off the island. He fell into the water, but then the Heart Pirates found him, took him up, and, brought him back. Now, during that time, Kaido had to fight against his own daughter. And he was like, damn, girl, what the fuck? You're going against me and other things. I was going to make you Shogun of Wano and everything else. That bitch Orochi is killed, so now you can take his spot. She was like, no, this is their country. You've been here and you've been, treating these people like shit, worse than that. You've taken their lives away, enslaved them, killed them, brainwashed them into believing that, this is the right way to do things and, leading through fear, basically. Tyrannical rule. And she's like, I don't like that shit. And when he told him that, he was like, I have to fight this guy. They were fighting, and then, Yamato ended up almost losing. But Luffy bounced back, because he's Luffy. It's the nigga with the fucking straw hat. He bounced back, and he was like, hey, bitch, I'm here to save you. And then Kaido was there, and he was like, all right, and Luffy busted out every single move he had, basically, except Tank, man. And he, was playing games with Kaido on the fucking rooftop, and they're still fighting up there. Luffy fell off the island and he came back because Momonosuke and Yamato are trying to keep the island of Onigashima from falling on top of the fire capital because Kaido has raised this up in the sky. So this was happening the whole time, like the whole Onigashima battle with the Akazaya 9 and his daughter and everything. He was still holding the island up in the sky with his Delphi power. This man was powerful and shit. He went into his hybrid form against Luffy, drunken, stupor, and everything. And he was fucking, Luffy up a little bit. Then he actually killed Luffy when the Cypher agent showed up. Boom! And he was dead. But that activated his awakening called Gear 5. Some shit that nobody saw coming. Toon Force Unleashed. Model Sun God Nika. And when that happened, Kaido was, done, basically. He knew in himself that this was the fight that he was meant to lose and shit. It came to that after he saw the shit that Luffy was doing. Like, this boy was not on my level before, but then now he is. And it's, like, ridiculous, But that's how the cookie crumbles when you fuck with people for 20 years and then, you expect nothing to come back and get you, but it comes back to get you. And Kaido learned that the hard way and shit. Luffy uses a badgering gun and slams him into the lava where he dies. Some people think that Kaido's still alive, and, I don't blame them for thinking that. But if he don't come back into the story, I won't be surprised. Personally, I won't be surprised if he don't ever come back in the story. because that was needed to happen. He fucked with people's lives in a way that, it was like, so Doflamingo did the same shit. Similarly, except more like Doflamingo kind of like used his heavenly demon acts. Like, some people actually saw Doflamingo as a good person. His manipulated tactics actually worked like that. Whereas Kaido, nobody saw Kaido as that. They would just say that out of fear because they know that he would club them to death. He would kill them and their families for like going against what he was trying to accomplish. He was trying to become, the king of the pirates in his own way. And surpass Gold Roger. He even told Luffy that, to conquer the sea, it's not just the devil fruit, it's also the hockey and shit. And he was in that fight with Luffy still, even with his, Gear 5 awakening, but, he came to lose that fight. Now, is Kaido still alive? I don't know. But I think if he don't come back, it's fine for the story. But he was a great villain for the time he was there, and he was one of Luffy's hardest opponents. He was Luffy's hardest opponent. Without that fight, Luffy would have never became the guy he's supposed to be. But after this fight, Luffy became one of the 4 Emperors of the Sea, one step closer to becoming the Pirate King. So, Kaido was, king of the beasts for a while. He grew up as a boy who, got his dick hunt because he was a Oni. But, his hatred for the government turned him into a ruthless, tyrant who wanted to, control everything. They want to try to control my power, I won't let them. I'll take over everything. They can't have my power. My power is mine. They can go fuck themselves. And also, but he went too far into that. He went extreme with that and started fucking with other people's lives and other things, and that's where he went wrong and shit. But Kaido was a great villain though for Luffy to fight against. But that is the story of Kaido as told by Darius the Green Angel. You gotta go watch One Piece, and you gotta watch all the way up to Wano. His silhouette was some bullshit at the beginning of One Piece. So if you watch One Piece at the beginning, you'll be like, who the fuck is that? And then you watch, towards Wano, and then you'll be like, oh, so that's who Kaido really is. He is a beast. But I have it on the thumbnail. That's the story of Kaido as told by me, Darius the Green Angel. Be cool on the corner.